Johnny Cash,
Yeah.
George Jones,
Yeah.
Merle Haggard, people like that. Just to be able to, first of all, to know those people, and second of all, be able to be close enough to them to be able to just hang out in a room and listen to them tell stories about the good old days. There's nothing better than that to me. And one of the people that falls in that category is a guy that we lost back over the holidays. A guy who died at the ripe old age of 94 years old, who was one of the most charismatic individuals I've ever met. A guy by the name of Little Jimmy Dickens.
Little Jimmy.
In the Grand Ole Opry. This is a guy that every time you saw him, you could not help but smile being around him. Because number one, he was one of the most welcoming people. I remember one of the first times I ever played the Grand Ole Opry. He was standing there in the wings and was like, welcome to the Grand Ole Opry.
Like Bill Monroe.
And yes, like Bill Monroe and like Roy Acuff and like so many of the others that were legendary. And then a few months later, when I was asked to become a member of the Grand Ole Opry, once again, he was there. Welcome, Travis, into the Grand Ole Opry. And he always had a funny story or a joke he wanted to tell you. I remember I was thinking about him over the holidays when I heard he passed away. And I was thinking about one of the first times I ever played the Grand Ole Opry. And I was standing in the wings, getting ready to go on stage. And here, little Jimmy Dickens comes walking up to me. Now this guy is 4'11". That was his height, 4'11". He looked like Mighty Mouse in pajamas. And he comes walking up to me, right, I'm just getting ready, they're getting ready to announce my name, and he tugs on my sleeve. And that meant he wanted me to bend down so he could whisper something into my ear. So I bent over and he said, Travis, you know, I hate doctors. I said, really? He said, oh yeah, I hate doctors. I said, why is that? He said, well, because 99% of the time, if you go see a doctor, you end up leaving in worse shape than you were when you got there. Now, I'm getting ready to walk on stage. He's telling me this, right? I said, well, that's probably true. He said, yeah, it's true. He said, I went to a doctor a few months ago for a checkup, and he said, at the end of the examination, the doctor prescribed me some of those little blue pills that they give men my age. And he said, I didn't take any of them for a long time. But he said, about 2 weeks ago, I decided I was going to try those out. And he said, so I took one, and it got lodged in my throat. He said, and you know I've had a stiff neck ever since then. He said, oh yeah, if you don't swallow them right away, they'll give you a stiff neck now. He said, on that same doctor visit, he said, I asked the doc midway through the examination, I said, Doc, could you please check out my left ear? He said, I can't hear anything out of my left ear. So the doctor took one of those little scopes with a light on it, and he shines it in his ear, and he said, Mr. Dickens, no wonder you can't hear anything out of that left ear. He said, you have a suppository. lodged in your left ear. And without missing a beat, Jimmy says, well, thanks, Doc. Now I know what I did with my hearing aid. And that was the kind of stories you would get out of him every single time. You would see him make me laugh my ass off every day. And so I was thinking about, over the holidays, I was thinking about him, and I was also thinking about some of the other old timers. There was in the mid-90s, there was a celebrity fishing tournament that used to take place every year in a place called Clewiston, Florida, which is on Lake Okeechobee. And it was a bass fishing tournament. And all of the big Opry stars would go down for this fishing tournament. And I went for like 5 years in a row. Took my dad, when my dad was still living, I took him with me, and we would go down, and people like Little Jimmy Dickens, Porter Wagner, Bobby Bear, Jerry Reed, and Mel Tillis. I got stuck in a boat with him one day, and that's a whole story. I have never laughed so much in my life. I laughed till I cried. But all these guys would go down, and so I started thinking about that, and then I started thinking about a song that really influenced me heavily when I was a kid, when I was just a kid growing up in Georgia. And the first time I ever heard this song, it was done by Bobby Bear. And then a few years later, I heard it done by Jerry Reed. Now, for those of you who might not remember Jerry Reed was a tremendous singer, songwriter. He did a lot of funny songs. But he also did a lot of great songs, serious songs. He did songs like, she got the gold mine, I got the shaft. When you're hot, you're hot. And he also wrote songs for other people. He wrote Guitar Man for Elvis Presley. And he also had a very lucrative acting career. He was in the movie, probably the role he's most remembered for. He was in a movie called Gator with Burt Reynolds way back when. But a few years later, he was in another movie with Burt Reynolds called Smokey and the Bandit, where he played Cletus Snow, the guy that was driving the truck full of beer that they were bootlegging from Texas back to Georgia. But what a lot of people don't realize is that Jerry Reed was one of the finest guitar players that has ever lived and ever walked the face of this planet. As a matter of fact, Chet Atkins, the famous guitar player from Nashville, used to say that very thing. Jerry Reed is one of the finest guitar players that's ever lived. And so when I was thinking about this song, I was trying to combine Bobby Bear's version with Jerry Reed's version. And even though I have to confess, I am nowhere close to being the guitar player that Jerry Reed was, this is what I came up with. Yes, I'm 500 miles away from home. Still 500 miles away from home. If I had been just that, I could be with my folks tonight. But I'm 500 miles away from home. Away from home, away from home. Oh, that time all alone. Yes, I'm 500 miles.